So welcome back from the experience of going into thirds. One thing I'd like to say is that this is definitely something that you want to practice. Whenever we are asked to do something deliberately with our imagination like this, then often people can find it challenging. Some people can do it really easy the first time, but I would say most people take a little bit of time just to practice it, just to start to flex their imagination muscles. The interesting thing is, this is something that we do automatically. We take our imagination to lots of different places, but it tends to happen unconsciously. And when we choose to do it by design, it can sometimes, certainly at first, be a little bit challenging. So please practice this, it will get better with time. So what I'd like to do is, like I said, we are only roughly halfway through this process. So I want to add the next layer in. And this is where we're going to be bringing back an experience of seconds, of the empathy position, where you psychologically take the imaginary leap and step into the shoes of someone else. So in relation to this process, this technique, what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to step into the shoes of the person that's criticising you. I know, a rather wacky concept, and you're maybe thinking, I don't want to step into that person's shoes, they don't like me. Well, actually, you're just thinking about that from first, if that's the case. And actually stepping into the shoes of the person that's criticising you can really give you a sense of what their real intentions are. It can give you a sense of what they're experiencing, perhaps their own prejudices, their own beliefs, their own values, their own past experiences. And this can be tremendously healing. But like I said, it can also reveal to you the positive intention behind the criticism in the first place. It can help you move beyond that surface level expression that makes it seem like it's a personal attack, and then get you to look more into the background about what they're really attempting to get across. So it's profoundly useful, and it can really help you heal the stinging wounds from criticism and grab something good from it. So the process is a bit like this. Now, if you are thinking, wow, this is a lot of steps, don't worry, because I have recorded an audio that will take you through the entire process from start to finish, which I'm going to be sharing with you a few videos' time. So ultimately at this stage, what you're looking to do is, this is something you've done already, of course. You've played through the entire experience where you were criticised from first. You've connected with your feelings, your thoughts, your beliefs, your opinions, what you think about it, and you've reflected on how you behaved. Then I asked you to step into thirds, the neutral mediator's perspective, that observer's place where you're directly in between, equidistant and at eye level. And you've just looked on from this cold researcher's-like perspective and went, that's interesting. They're doing that, they're doing this. And hopefully that's gave you an insight, and it's helped you start to gain access to some new learnings. So the next step that you want to take is you want to step out of thirds and go into second. And this is where you step into the shoes of the person who's criticised you. And you play through the entire scenario, the entire memory from their perspective, looking back at yourself. Now, I know this sounds weird, but honestly, this is a natural place for us to go. We all naturally empathise, unless you have some kind of neurological deficiency, which is a very small percentage of people. But we all do this, so what I'm asking you to do is to do it deliberately. So inside your mind, you want to recall the scenario and step into the shoes of this person that's criticising you. Play the whole thing through from this perspective and just start to gain new insights. Because there's a very good chance that you've not seen it from this perspective up until now. Because when we're criticised, especially if it involves things that fire off negative emotions in us, then usually we get locked into first. We start thinking of our own perspective. So this can be tremendously powerful. And then once you've done that, you then step out of second and you go back into first, bringing all of these insights together back into you, into the here and now. Now, when people do this, sometimes they even like to take on board the body posture of the person who's criticising them. If you recall from the exercise back in the last section, where you mimicked the body posture of a friend, family, or a co-worker, and then you started to gain an insight into what they were thinking, what they were feeling. Often when you bring in physicality, then it can just make this process so much more powerful. So feel free to do that if you like. I would recommend, if you're doing this, close the blinds so that your neighbours don't think, what are they up to? Are they moving about in a strange way? But you are acting a little bit, and that's absolutely fine. It will help you gain some really profound and very unique insights. So ultimately what you're looking to do here by going through these 3 different positions is to gain access to more of the full story. Because when you're seeing it through first, you're only getting a part of the story. Then when you step into thirds, you're getting an extra layer to the entirety of what is going on in this situation. And then when you step into second, once again, you're getting another very powerful and insightful layer about what is actually going on in this experience. So you're enriching your own version of what happened. You're gaining access to more of the full story. So I'd like to give you an example just so that this idea is crystal clear inside your mind. Now, this that I'm about to describe happened to me around about 3 years ago. I do remember the exact date because it was when we had to vote for Brexit in the UK, so it's lodged inside my mind. So this was first thing in the morning, and I was actually going down to vote. Now, it was around about 6:30 in the morning, so I decided to go and buy some breakfast because I hadn't ate yet. So these are shops, that's my car, and this is the road that I drove in, and that is a parking space. So I came in and I parked there and then went out to go and buy some bacon and eggs from the shop or something like that. Now, while I was in the shops, someone else came along and parked right next to me. But then also what happened was someone came along and parked here. Illegally, if you ask me, but there was no double yellow lines. Now, I was in a bit of a rush, I have to be honest. So when I came out of the shops, I didn't check to see if anyone had parked on the roads. So I jumped in my car and I reversed, and unfortunately, I crashed into this person's car. Now, as soon as I crashed into them, I thought, oh no. So I drove back into the same parking space, and then I was starting to look at what damage was done to my own car. Then I was going to head over to the other one. Now, while I was doing this, the other man jumped into his car here and started to reverse. And I don't know if you can guess what happened next. He reversed out and crashed into the same car in practically exactly the same place. So as he was driving back to inspect his own damage, I turned round and he rolled down his window and said, "Is this your car?" And I said, "No, this is my car, but I've done exactly the same as what you just did there." Then all of a sudden, the woman who owned the car that had been crashed into twice came out of the shops. And she obviously, we had to explain to her, look, 2 of us have crashed into your car, both at the same time practically, and both in the same place. Now, the interesting thing was we all experienced the situation from very different perspectives. So we had different interpretations of what actually went on and whose fault it was. Now, this guy here blamed it all on me. He said, well, you crashed into our car first, so it's your fault. You have to pay for it. You caused the most damage anyway. So he was basically seeing it from first position. He was going through the whole experience inside his mind through self. He was not considering my feelings, my opinions, and he certainly wasn't considering her opinions either. It was purely just about himself. Now, the woman, on the other hand, she was a really nice woman, by the way. She was experiencing the whole thing through second. She kept on saying, "Is everyone okay? Oh, are you hurt? Are you fine? That's the only thing that's important here, as long as everybody's okay." So she didn't really have much of a concern for herself. She was purely seeing it from other people's perspective. She was flicking into seconds. Now, I had a very unique perspective because I had experienced the whole thing through self, but then I actually got to see pretty much exactly the same thing happen from a neutral observer's standpoint because this guy did the same, he's done the same thing. So I had the benefit of being able to see it in first and also have some kind of objectivity. And it was funny because we all had completely different accounts of what had actually gone on. And that's the point I want to make here, is that if you just do one of these positions, then you are going to be limiting yourself in terms of having an appreciation for the full story. But by being able to go through each of these different perspectives, you can start to piece together all the different scenarios, all the different ways of thinking about it, so you have a much more enriched account of what actually went on. And that's exactly what we did. We met the next day and we pieced together all the pieces of information and we decided the best way forward. So that's the process that I'd like you to do. Like I said, you want to think back to the situation where you were criticised, experience it through yourself, then you want to step out and go into third. Go into the neutral observer's perspective. Then you want to step into the shoes of the person who's criticising you, gain some new insights, learn some new ways of thinking about it, pay attention to the way you're behaving. And then you want to take those insights and then bring it back into you. And by doing this, you dramatically enrich your own perception of what has actually gone on. So, there is another element I'd like to add into this, and like I said, don't worry if you think, oh, this is lots of information here, there's lots of steps. I am going to be sharing with you an audio that will take you through the entire process. But in the next video, I want to add on the final layer, and that's something called future pacing. Because it's one thing to gain new insights, new learnings, new ways of behaving and thinking and feeling, but it's another thing to take those new learnings and really start to put them into practice into some kind of future scenario. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the next video. So if you want to head over there and we'll discuss future pacing.